Okay, we're back to the brain of the gut. This is Dr. David Jubb. We're in Stockholm. We have a most amazing, beautiful family and audience that's here, that's come, and we're getting a bit of feedback about what we're doing from our audience, and we have a most amazing, intelligent audience. I don't think I've actually said anything to you that you don't already know. I'm getting quite a bit of energy from everybody actually thinking, my God, I haven't said anything you don't really already know. And this is making sense to you. The gut's brain really is known as the enteric nervous system, and we have areas of our brain, that's the 11th cranial nerve that raises your eyebrows, to the 5th cranial nerve, which involves swallowing and cardiovascular reflex, and then autism really can have occurred to boys much more than girls, because a boy's brain is not evolved completely until he's 18 months of age, and his brain is continuously developing during that time after birth, whereas her brain is more complete and set sort of relatively, more so when she's born, and the blood-brain barrier is protecting her brain, whereas for the boy's brain, pyramidal cells continue to grow and develop once the child is born, and that doesn't really stop until around 18 months old. So during this period of time in utero and up to 18 months, his brain is not really protected by the blood-brain barrier. And the areas of the brain which are affected are all the mirror motor neurons, for instance, which in autism cause you, if you've got your mirror motor neurons not present, you other than can learn from other people's behaviour. So all sorts of various conditions affect our eyesight and things, and our ability to be able to process facial expression and this sort of thing. And it's very interesting that people who have Asperger's syndrome, have you heard of Asperger's?
Yes.
Yeah. Asperger's syndrome really, most attorneys have Asperger's, accountants often can have varying degrees of Asperger's, tend to have sort of high functioning as far as serial processing skills are concerned, but Asperger's syndrome people, they have a short circuit when it comes to being able to process emotion and get a sense of feeling of others' emotions. So they can say things which can really, like, someone can think, well, how could that person say that? Aren't they aware of what the other person could be feeling? You know, you've got people, and they're really not so aware of, or even ever care much about how other people feel, because they're not getting the feedback necessarily from that. And there's all varying degrees of Asperger's syndrome, which these people can be very highly functioning, but in the department of emotional kinesthetic feeling processing, they tend to fall quite short. So the jobs that they can get are all jobs where it's just a serial process type of learning. Attorneys primarily, accountants, engineers, programmers, somebody said yes, Amriti, programmers, that's right. Engineers can sometimes be this way, but in all jobs and things where all you do is you do serial processing and you're not engaged or involved in being able to understand or observe or see people's feelings, that doesn't come into the type of work you do as an engineer much, or an accountant or an attorney. So they happen to be professions also which are the worst in relation and things. It's not easy for them to be able to have relation much. But so the gut's brain, known as the enteric nervous system, regulates these nerves and has to be protected by the blood-brain barrier. But if you're having wheat, grains, beans, and all this dead food, milk product, casein, and lactose, all this stuff which is not being able to broken down, all this runaway sugars which is in grain, which is in bread and corn and rice, cane sugar, these are the same as cane sugar. So those runaway sugars cause a clumping of blood, and it causes the blood-brain barrier not to protect the brain, and strange undigestible proteins get up into the brain and they affect various areas of our brain, creating all kinds of sort of conditions somewhat, which a lot of these conditions can be relatively healed up. Before I came over here, I work a lot with autism and minimal brain dysfunction and also Asperger's-like syndromes and that. And I work with a young boy who had seizures since his mum and dad didn't sort of get along, and the mother took the child with her and didn't give access of the child to the father, and around that time this little boy was affected emotionally, and he developed autism pretty much fairly straight away during this stressful period of time, and the mother left and went to another country, and some time passed by, and that was enough to create a parental alienation and a child alienation, where the two lost familiarity with each other. And when they finally visited the father again, there was no necessary connection, and the little one felt that and then developed seizures. So it was the stress of those things that occurred affected his brain function, and so not only is he autistic, but he ended up having like 20 seizures a day or more. So he was 17 years of age, and he'd been drugged so bad he was just completely couldn't function, like dribbling with saliva. He wasn't able to talk.
Someone wants to know what seizures are.
Seizures?
Epileptiska
Oh, thank you.
anfall.
Yes.
Say it again.
Epileptiska anfall.
Thank you. So he was very debilitated. Anyway, I just had one reading, could see everything was going inside his brain, everything that was going inside his gut, put him on a program, gave him a few material substances to assist, which couldn't necessarily really be found much in what he was doing food-wise. And in 2 weeks' time, he had gone from having 20 seizures a day to 1 every 3 days. So that was radical.
What happened?
He went from 20 seizures a day on average to 1 seizure every 3 days. And then I came and I did a little bit of more work with him, and I realised that he was over-breather. You know, he was seriously over-breathing, breathing off all the carbon dioxide. So we corrected that, and hasn't had a seizure since. And the autism's cleared up, and he's learning to read, and he completely is leading a functional life.
Mm.
Yeah. So you can be aware that our present state of understanding of what's happening to people who have neurological or cognitive or emotional sorts of challenges really have a gut condition. So in the submucosal plexus, this is this region just sort of in here. This is an intestinal tract. You've got layers that contain really sensory nerves and things that communicate with the myenteric plexus, which is a plexus which is holding your intestinal tract sort of connected where it is. It's a mesentery, it's like a diaphragm that connects everything together. We've got various diaphragms beyond just this a diaphragm that pulls your lungs down and relaxes things to create the breathingness. We've got a mesentery diaphragm in here, and then we've got diaphragms further down that's pelvically.
It's basically muscle,
all this has a connective tissue connectiveness to itself, which connects all this together a little. See, it's like a highway of connectedness where everything is connected. So you've got this submucosal condition here, and then you've got motor fibres that stimulate the secretion of various fluids and things that come into the lumen. So serotonin is very important for motility and things. Without having serotonin, there is little motility. So food doesn't move as well as what it can through the intestinal tract. And then you've got a myenteric plexus, slightly, well, this is all this myenteric plexus in. This layer contains neurons responsible for regulating sort of enzymes and the output more from adjacent sort of organs and things. And then inside this lumen area here, there really is no nerves. This is the area where actual digestion really occurs. And the brain and the head and the gut have to monitor conditions more or less in the lumen here, and it has to do this across the lining of the bowel. You've got a mesentery section, which is just this covering here, all right, and this attaches the bowel to the body wall, and it contains the major arteries, veins, and lymphatics, and this all contains more of the external nerves. But when we put all of this together, you've got more nerve cells in all of this than you have in the sole of the spinal cord. All right? Okay. So, you know, most of the persons such which have suffered from mental, emotional, cognitive conditions, before they were born, mum ate dermot and dead food, and that created fermentation, that caused serotonin really not to be present properly, so there was not much blood flow to the brain. Strange undigestible proteins can have come up through the blood-brain barrier, which is made of albumin. Albumin happens to be a supertransporter, which only is present if there's no inflammation. You have inflammation, you have reduced albumin, you have a blood-brain barrier challenge, right? Children in utero, where mum's eating dermot, they have to be mechanically pushed out, so they're not hydraulically born. The amniotic sac, which is the sac that you're born in, is supposed to be shoulders, head born with the amniotic sac intact, and then it bursts. This is a natural birth. Very few natural births occur today. People know about, some marriage that just occurred in the ceremony of it and all this sort of thing, and the World Cup with soccer, everybody knows what happened and stuff, but nobody knows what a natural birth is, basically. But fermentation of carbohydrates, now all fresh fruits and vegetables are carbohydrate. But what we're talking about really is where the gut's not moving, anything that's really a sugar can cause fermentation, but certainly foods which are undigestible, and certainly starches and things, are going to have a disaccharide sugar, like potato, carrot, beet, corn. They have a disaccharide sugar, that's a sugar which is not going to be managed at all by your blood. And so that is a very serious situation because it clumps blood and things, and that affects inflammation, and then inflammation raises fibrin and globulin, which are platelets, and they become in excess in your plasma of your blood, and then albumin is reduced, and albumin is a supertransporter. Transports all nutrients to the brain, transports all waste away. Inflammation and foods that create inflammation is a major condition causing blood-brain barrier challenges. Other things today is salt of vaccination, and then other things which affect this are emotional conditions which can cause albumin not to be produced properly. Epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol, adrenocorticotropic hormone are neurotransmitters which are stress related. The moment kids go to school, enormous more cortisol can be found in their saliva. Children who go to schools which are more caring about the learning process, like Rudolf Steiner schools and things like that. These kids are wonderful, and studies today show they have far greater creativity, way beyond anybody who goes just to a regular school, which most of these regular schools are hell for the kids. I might have to define that word, hell, which is not a place. It's actually a state of being. You know, my cameraman said, "You've mentioned hell 5 times, now it's the 6th time, that's the 7th time. You better define what the meaning of that is." It actually is really a state of being. But mucus forming dead food, which is dermot consumption, like banana, dates, pineapple, corn, and foods like this, they create mucus. That mucus causes insipid pus to be present more. That insipid pus causes bile to stick to it, and then you've got something like stone formation in your bile bladder, in the liver area, in the sinusoid areas, which are collection points of the liver, and right throughout the intestinal tract. You've got stone formation in the kidneys, and stone formation where we just felt your arm, and you've got stone. You've got this right throughout the whole of the body, and it's from all these very serious sort of foods which have very, very high phosphate count, which is not for humans. Breast milk, 5 parts calcium, 2 parts phosphate. Leaf smot, 5 parts calcium, 2 parts phosphate. Dermot, it could be 20 to 2,000 times phosphate to 1 calcium. But we need to learn about what leaf smot is and dermot, and we need to value where we are with things, and we've got great insight, and people who are having a deep insight into things where there's a great care for the value of things to keep their enzymes. So people have become aware that heating food certainly is not right, and that is a great principle, but that's all. And then, as we've talked, changing your diet is a factor, but it would not heal most of these conditions up of itself. You absolutely have to learn how to do a non-surgical, non-druggist approach to dislodging the debris. So moving to leaf smot is not a true healing therapeutic, and all investigation shows it's not. Certainly other sorts of diets are, some could be moderately helpful to not at all, but ultimately food of itself would not change the conditions, though you must learn about leaf smot and apply leaf smot and get rid of dermot, but you've got to actually do something which is non-surgical, more non-druggist, to dislodging the debris to cause the system to function again properly, all right? If we've got a rusty, rotted system and blocked system, good food is not going to be processed properly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, good on you. Excellent. Okay. Behavioural deficiencies are always increased following high deficiencies, or deficit, that's okay, are always increased following more higher concentrations of dead food. So most people who do suffer from various conditions they know of, when they do dead food, the meditative state, which could have been present somewhat before that, can less than be remain nicely. Okay, isn't that a nice way to say it? So in the intestine, we have cannulas, and only frugivores on the earth have cannulas. Omnivores have no cannula, and carnivorous animals have no cannula, and herbivorous animals also have no cannulas, which is these ribs, right? These are called cannulas. So they are only found in the digestive tract in somatotyping, which is the science of, in physiology, how our environment has shaped our body. It's called somatotyping. There's microvilli, and these microvilli are like finger-like projections, which are in these cannulas. And then these finger-like projections have little gliaxal threads, which increase the surface area, and the cells that line these villi, right, they're called enterocytokine cells. Enterocytokine cells. And these cells which line these villi, which absorb water-soluble nutrient. Did you know that they don't exist on oxygen? They don't exist on sugar. They can't manage fat. No. They can't use any protein. No. Wow. Matter of fact, they can't use anything you eat. It's like, wow, really? That's right. There is no respiration from these cells from anything you eat. Did you know that unless you have nurse cells in here, there is no glutamine, and that is the only substance that can nourish these absorptive cells. Have you heard this before?
No.
Well, this is very important, right? Because without glutamine, without proper life colloid materials, like what this material is in here, this is a material which we're supposed to have in our digestive tracts. If we can remember the photo of the beautiful beach and nature, you're getting this, and you're getting about 1/3 of a teaspoon every day. And this is not found in anyone's diet today. Most people living in a surgically sterile environment, meant to have 80,000 species in here. The average person can only have about 1,000. You need a probiotic or something to bring in at least 50,000. And this has got 50,000 in it. But you have an intelligence of a wolf more that you actually have your proper biologics. But these biologics assist to produce a milk called glutamine, and they receive a little bit of sugar from the villi and sustenance, which they exchange, and then they feed the absorptive cells with glutamine. Very nice relationship. Ants go and they stroke aphids, the ant does, and the aphid gives it a little bit of sugar, and so ants always are going up to aphids and just stroking them. They go, and they produce a little bit of sugar, and the ant goes, so there's this sort of a relationship that's going on, but a queen only becomes a queen because of what that larva is fed. Your brain only can have evolved or developed because of what it was fed today, in your life now. Okay? Larva can be fed and is visited 10 times more than other larvae, becomes a queen. And the queen lives for 4 years and has a consciousness of 4 years. Worker bees, 4 weeks. And so the queen represents like a consciousness beyond, you could say it's like a super sort of consciousness, and because the queen lives for like 4 years, and her brain and structure is developed quite a bit as a result of what she's fed, period. That's it. And then what you're fed, you either become a worker bee or a drone, and they all have a quite much shorter life than what the queen bee has. And then the queen bee can have a relationship with the beekeeper. As far as consciousness is concerned, the worker cannot necessarily know much, and she just sort of lives for 4 weeks, and it's enough for her to learn the various things, other functions in the hive. The queen, she can see generation after generation after generation, and she flies out, in the bright of the day, as high as she can, and the drones chase her if they can catch her. But she really can have a relation with even the beekeeper. So we can think about consciousness there and what we can be aware of and levels of actual consciousness. You've got supra consciousness more, where you've got the relation of consciousness of the beekeeper and the relation the beekeeper has with the queen's sense of the beekeeper, and then the bees, and then you've just got the bees and the consciousness of more or less the bees. But so these villi are fed a milk called glutamine. The cells which line the villi are called enterocytokine cells, and only glutamine can be, and it's a milk that's produced for them, and that's it. Everything you eat will not nourish whatsoever any of these absorptive cells.
So it's only the glutamine that they...
It's only the proper biologics here, life colloid biologics, having them properly in here, that you can have proper health. Now everybody knows that a termite could have digested your neighbour's home and just eaten your neighbour's home right up, right? You've seen it. It's not good for the neighbours, but house was just eaten by termites. And then how did the termite eat the wood? It's like, well, it's pretty good, isn't it? You can just munch on wood and get the benefit from it. But the termite only can have absorbed and managed the wood because of resident bacteria in here. Same with us. We can only get the benefit of our food and things that you actually have your proper biologics. All right, let's go. So these brush border cells really give an enormous surface area, all right? And as you eat beans, the more beans you eat, the more celiac conditions you're going to have, the more grains and even living food that sprouts the grain and things, and raw food doesn't even bother to sprout it. They don't even know about living food, but Anne Wigmore's work, which is living food, is which is vegetarian, whereas raw food isn't, because you've got lots of people eating raw flesh and stuff in Europe and in America that do raw food, raw horse's flesh, raw eggs, raw butter, just raw. So raw as a word is probably the most primitive word to be describing foods. Anne Wigmore didn't really use that word at all. She coins the term, or she doesn't coin it, she popularises living food, which is sprouting the grain in the bean, but sprouting the grain in the bean can be a little better, and that's called living food. Plus living food is vegetarian, whereas raw food isn't, as it's defined. But the grains, the beans, so in living food there were lentils, mung beans, azuki beans, there were soybeans also, there was garbanzo beans, wow, and they were used a lot in the program. And then you've got banana, you've got dates, you've got pineapple, and then you've got sprouted wheat, which is full of phosphates incredibly. So there was really no seeds in the program much. But most of all these foods, we just mentioned carrot also, and beet. Okay, so they were the primary foods, and avocado. So avocado was the only live food that's in Anne's program, or living food. But leaf smot we need to learn, which is just simply no starch, no grains or beans, basically. But there's all seeds, nuts, everything else which is vegetarian is leaf smot. But what happens is all this becomes decreased and atrophied, and now there really is no absorption whatsoever. Finally, when this occurs, you can have inflammation, but eventually when you have adrenal exhaustion, the lips thin more and more and more and more and get really, really dry and of no colour, hardly at all. Whilst you've got a management to manage the inflammation, sort of, you've got, you can have inflammation present, quiet, and then your lips could become, sort of big and huge mouth. The big and huge mouth is serious inflammation in the gut and shows degeneration of the intestinal tract. Smaller mouth shows beauty and shows absolute evidence of vitality here more. Whereas huge lips is sort of a sign of excess, eating to excess. But you've got all sorts of things which is really affecting your immune system and things here. And you've got endogenous, your own natural opiates. Endogenous opiates are endorphins, beta endorphins, and kephalins. You've got amaret. You've got quite a few substances which are produced which is neurotransmitters, which cause us to feel elated and elevated. But without these endogenous opiates and things, we don't really have a proper nerve system. When you eat bread, when you eat grains, all beans, that's going to knock out the opiates. So you can't have production of opiates. You've got opiates that are present in the body. Goes, oh gee, these are like floating around. It seems like we have those, but they get stuck into places, you see, can't be properly broken down. Immune cells has to clean those up, and it's just a very formidable condition which affects our nerve cells. Okay. Healthy normal villi really has enormous surface exchange, enormous, right, which can be just reduced to a surface like that. So you can see you've just got that much surface there, which is maybe just about one of those. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 times the length of this you've got in a healthy absorption. So when you've got celiac condition, you're hungry, nothing will work right, you've got to get up and you tuck into the ice box straight away, you can't fast, you feel like you can fast at all, and it's just a continuous having to eat, but nothing's going to be absorbed, just going to be defecated out. It's just sort of an exercise. You get a bit of a head rush and things, but there is no nutrients. And most people, as they age, they become less and less mineralised, and these things are very necessary to have proper brain function. We talk about the Queen. Think about the metaphor of the Queen, all right? Okay. You've got cholecystokinin, which is released down here. You've got secretin, which is all these things. The cholecystokinin causes bladder contraction, gastrointestinal motility, and pancreatic exocrine secretions, which are involving lipase and protease and amyloidic enzymes to break fats and sugars and proteins down more in the intestinal tract. You've got a whole range of neurotransmitters which is also involved in the brain. You've got neurotransmitters which are produced in the brain of the gut up here called ghrelin, which assists to cause persons to actually feel a little bit of hunger, and I enjoy that feeling the most. My awareness of a slight feeling of hunger, that is what I'm going for myself, you see, because that causes me to feel elevated and really on. And finally, when that's not there, it's like, oh, it's like, well, we're meant to be for food to be suspended. It causes us to be able to have this little bit of a search pattern and inquiry and feeling of like actually doing things and getting things done. But once somebody's satisfied that, unnaturally, they're continuously more couch potatoes, they're just not really doing anything, they're procrastinating. So ghrelin is very important because when ghrelin is present, it causes growth hormone release. You actually have ability to rejuvenate whilst you're feeling small hunger. So I know if I exercise or I do anything and I have that little bit of hunger, I don't want to satisfy that, period. Absolutely not. No. Why? Because that's the greatest powerful feeling you could learn to have, that you can have a joy of, and then days and days can pass away. Maybe you didn't really eat anything at all. But you can move more toward this if it's interesting, because we're meant for food somewhat to be suspended. But be kind and gentle and allowing. Don't change anything around necessarily. Be comfortable. Have a joy where you are. Sometimes you eat something and you know it's not quite right. It's okay. I think live and have good life, but know what good food is versus not so good food.
Are you saying that I should have a little bit of hunger all the time?
the more that you can appreciate the feeling of hunger, the more powerful it is that we can have more rejuvenative forces. Did you know that the only thing which links to to long life is calorie restriction? That's the one habit and behaviour that can cause you to have a longer life, actually. Right?
The hunger that you're talking about isn't that the searing hunger where you feel like your stomach is being cut in two, which is what happens apparently when you eat dead food and you like stop for a while?
Yes, okay, thank you.
Because
So that we're talking about degrees. That's right. It's the same, only in that situation what you've got is you've got had insulin raised unnaturally because you ate dermot, okay? That raises insulin. The moment insulin is raised, somatostatin is a substance which is released by the anterior pituitary and blocks human growth hormone. There's no human growth hormone, right? Whilst insulin is present, it's robbing all the sugar from your blood, and so that unnatural condition could also be releasing of ghrelin, but because insulin is there can be no human growth hormone release. The two, it's sort of searing is a nice word that you said there to describe that, because it's absolute, like, oh my God, emergency, I've got to eat something, which is a hypoglycemic state. But we're talking about a feeling of a sense of a comfort and a curious interest and just a joy that you feel when your tummy's empty. Have you ever felt this? You can feel it if you fast. All of a sudden, you can be realised of a great feeling. Oh my God! It's like, whoa, is it okay to feel this good? It's like, should this be banned? People shouldn't be able to feel this good, should they? So you've got insulin being released by the pancreas here, and glucagon causes glucose homeostasis. You've got pancreatic polypeptides, which are little protein molecules and things that assist to cause more gastric motility. You've got amylin, which goes, whoops, wait a minute, I feel satiated, that's enough. And you've got bicarbonate of soda being released by the pancreas and the liver here to neutralise the acid churn from the stomach. And when that's not occurring, small intestine in here, all the villi start to atrophy, and the surface area, which should be, could you imagine like a cutting board in the kitchen that you use in your kitchen? Just see that right now. Imagine you've got stuff all over it, now you have to wash it, you know what I mean? Just now, think about it, but see that cutting board and put that down in the edge of a tennis court. And now, how long would it take you to go ahead and put cutting boards down to fill up the whole tennis court? That's the surface area of your small intestine. The surface area of your small intestine is about the surface area of a tennis court. And but that could be reduced radically by a celiac condition. Okay. But these neurotransmitters, you just got to know, are also involved in your energy and motion state. Okay? If you've got inflammation here, your stomach's not working properly, you've got dermot in there, then your energy and motion, your cognitive ability, the brain upstairs is not going to be received of proper benefit. Is this making sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay. Gut vitality really does improve your blood-borne inhibitors in your body that block the expression of the life colloid, which is the building block of your cells. So this is life below the level of a cell, including a cell. But inside a cell, you've got life colloid, and there are organelles inside the cell, like your DNA, which is made up out of spores, which a life colloid is, and then you've got tubular structure, you've got all kinds of organelles which is in the cell, which are made up out of building blocks, which are little double spores. So those little double spores are blocked in their expression to be transformed into a mould or a fungus inside the cell, that's what cancer is. But you've got blood-borne inhibitors you're supposed to have, but when you do leaf SMOT, you have these blood-borne inhibitors, which happen to be citric acid primarily, lactic acids, and alkaline element. You must have those in your blood. Now, the average person on DMOT, eating grains, sprouted lentils and things like that, they have no lactic acid, no citric acid, and there's no ability to transport any spare electron. So their blood becomes more alkaline and it shifts and becomes more alkaline, and then the tissue becomes more acidic. A great disparity exists. There's no friction grid for ionisation to occur and electrons to be given off, so there's no energy and things. And the interior of the body of these life colloid, they can change into mould, fungus and yeast. That's what that means. They have multiple ability to transform. So these spores don't just remain as a spore, but they're the building block of a bacteria. A bacteria develops a harder outer shell and becomes a mould. The mould grows in colonies and becomes a fungus. The fungus culminates in a little fungal hive, grows into the adjacent cell. The moment that occurs, the body goes, oops, red blood corpuscle comes along, parks, and then the colloid material of it assembles itself into a cell that surrounds this area and insists it, which that is primarily always neoplastic and cancerous conditions are found more in connective tissue and from connective tissue cells more than any other cell, which doesn't really have its proper humoral element necessary, like these blood-borne inhibitors are not present properly, and then connective tissue is primarily the subcells which most cancer cells arise from, which can be reduced and what's called down-regulated and be reduced back into their double spore stage. So fungus, mould and yeast can be reduced back to its double spore building blocks, which then you can make blood from. But you must have your blood-borne inhibitors, and what are they? Lactic acid, citric acid and alkaline element. And you absolutely need these to have proper blood-borne inhibitors, which on DMOT there is absolutely no way you can have. Okay? If your blood and your biotrain, the biotrain really is your pH of your environment of your cells. Like if this is the cell here, oh my God, the environment around the cell have to have the right pH. But the pH of the cell interior becomes more and more acidic, the blood becomes more and more alkaline, the disparity exists and no friction grid left. Finally, the cell can't give any more carbon out, and if it can't give any carbon out, it can't receive any oxygen. And so these little life colloid, they turn to fermentation. And they can get spare electron from fermentation. And then you're ending up with multinucleated cells. You're ending up with hyperplasia, dysplasic types of cells. So the bioterrain, this bioterrain is a pH. It's also conductivity, which is really to do with minerals, and the vast majority of people on DMOT, there is no minerals. After beans or grains, bam, doesn't matter if it's sprouted or not, there's going to be no minerals whatsoever. How can there be? You eat chocolate, there's going to be no minerals. You're eating excess green, there is going to be no minerals. None. Why? Tannin is going to bind in all the green. It's going to bind a lot with most everything. So it's going to stop anything from being absorbed. You have to look into that. Phytic acid from the grains and the beans is going to bind with all nutrient and absorptive sites. It's going to be no minerals. You can be observed to see and test bloods, what people eat, and you can find all this out. But you have to have also a negative redox, which is just a code for antioxidant. It means, hey, got ability to be able to give off a few spare electrons here, right? So those three things cause a bioterrain. If you do leaf SMOT, you're going to have a proper bioterrain. Do DMOT, and it's guaranteed not to have proper bioterrain at all, right? But most people are unaware of life below the level of a cell. and it's a lot just like test tube, like crackpot science. It's sort of like observe to see something there, and apparently if it's there, then it must be good for the body, which that's not the case at all. A bile occlusion initiates blood-borne inhibitors. GOLA, blockage. Is that a nice way to say it, to understand? Gallbladder blockage initiates those blood-borne inhibitors not to be present. When you have gallbladder occlusion, your blood does not have its proper blood-borne inhibitors. So mold, fungus and yeast really can have arisen in that condition, and that affects the brain upstairs. Okay, let's go to the next one quick.
35 minutes.
Quick. You eat all cooked dead protein. B6, which is pyridoxine, is the protein vitamin. Eat dead food, you're going to have protein deficiency, you're going to have protein vitamin deficiency. B6 is the second most deficient condition of all people on the earth. The first is what?
Magnesium.
Magnesium. The second is pyridoxine, and the third is essential fatty acids, okay? So B6 is solely deficient because most people are eating a lot of dead food. Without B6, you cannot produce proteins. So how are you going to make any neurotransmitters? Impossible. You just get old and crotchety. Bloating, diarrhea, constipation, mucoid stools. Your stool's always a mucoid stool, not fluffy and light, and just with any disturbance of the water just breaks apart. It's not a healthy stool which is suspended in the water. It's not a floater, not a sinker. It has the same buoyancy as water. Okay, it's neutral. It's not a floater, and it's not a sinker. You see, and any disturbance of the water, it breaks apart. That's a healthy stool for a human. When you have a stool like that, it's more like a dog having a poop. You don't have to clean yourself at hardly anything. It's just really clean, basically. Seriously. Okay. All cleaning and more cleaning you have to do, all more mucus and dead food and dermot that you've consumed. Okay. Okay. Of course, serotonin and all these neurotransmitters are so involved in so many things. Gee. Without serotonin, you're not going to really have any osteoblast, for your bones. So you can't. You just over time become osteopenia and osteoporosis. You've got thin nails, weak sort of nails not so strong. We can have quite a serious situation, and serotonin not being present is going to affect calcium. Calcium has to have to run your endocrine glands. Otherwise, there's no endocrine function. It's quite a serious situation when your brain and your gut's not functioning. Next. We talked about norepinephrine just a little bit, but norepinephrine, really, in the picture that we saw of all the fruits, has a lot of tyrosinase in it. It's a major mood elevator, those foods, because it makes norepinephrine, because it's got tyrosinase in it. Okay? And tyrosinase is very important in making norepinephrine. You need this to have attention, motivation, pleasure and reward. Serotonin causes you to be able to clear away anxiety. If you don't have serotonin present, obsessions and compulsions are not being managed. And so you have obsessive compulsive sort of disorders and things. If not enough serotonin, you can have hyperactive attention deficit disorder, which can be healed up by clearing out the bile stones, reducing inflammation, bringing in a little formula of a few things, bringing in some niacin, slowly increasing the amount of niacin to about 13,000 milligrams, which is quite a bit over, increasing, starting with 500 milligrams or 1,000 milligrams and working your way up to 13. And this is causing more and more blood flow to the brain and increasing serotonin and as you reduce the inflammation in here and you move more toward leaf-smot, you can wean yourself off the niacin and you're healed up. You're healed up. So that's a way forward. Dopamine causes you to feel able to go get things and do things, you know. And you know, when you've got enough dopamine, you're really getting things done. You're moving forward. Whereas when you don't have enough dopamine, you go, oh, there's a lot of procrastination, so I'm going to go do that, and you're sort of leaning back. You know, there's a lot of sequential and simultaneous sort of incongruities in behaviour and things. But there has to be a proper balance between norepinephrine, dopamine, and serotonin to actually really have alertness, have motivation and pleasure reward, and be able to clear away obsessions and compulsions and continuous sort of thinking and stuff. You need serotonin, dopamine to be present. You have to have that to be motivated to get things done. Very important in behaviour. Okay. You've got an axon hillock here in a nerve cell, and this axon hillock sums up all incoming and inhibitory and excitatory messages, and you have to have 78% to pass this on. If you've got 77% of what you need, it won't be passed on. Wow. You actually have to have 78% of your nerve system and your behaviour and your full care of something to affect behavioural change. If you've got 60%, it's not going to be enough. Wow. You actually have to have more than 78%. It's called an all or nothing phenomenon. Okay.
So what was 76% of the
78%.
78% of
78%. You have to have 78% of nerve function fully supportive of something, and then you can have the behaviour. But you won't, if you've got 1% less, it won't work. This is called an all or nothing phenomenon in neurology. Tryptophan, which niacin is very similar to, is necessary to be present, and it happens to be in the aromatic foods. So who's eating aromatic food? People into leaf-smot, because all dermot hardly has any tryptophan. So that's the carrot, that's the beet, that's the corn, that's the wheat, that's the grains, that's the beans and stuff. Nothing much aromatic in that. There's very little tryptophan. So how are you going to make serotonin if you eat junk food, dead food? Doesn't matter if it's like uncooked or not. It's dead, period. You're not going to be able to produce the substances necessary to make the proper neurotransmitters and things. And certainly with serotonin, foodstuffs like that really take out serotonin. It's just like, well, it's not going to create serotonin. I know people, if they actually are healed up from being schizophrenic, but if they have grain and bean and even sprouted substance like that, they can have a relapse back. Yes. They have sensitivity to foodstuffs like that. But 5-hydroxytryptophan, is the substance which is produced by the cells which line the passageway of your digestive tract, and then this tryptophan becomes just 5-HT, which is serotonin, and that has to be present, and that's transferred right through the blood and things. And that's very important, of course, to have proper neurotransmission. Okay, next quick. You have to have proper levels of sodium, but who has that on a dead food diet? And most of these living in raw foods now have taken to eating rocks. So rock salt, which is horrific. It's so amazing, actually. I've been in the industry to see what people came along, and then I've seen rocks come into the health food store now. People are grinding down rocks, and they think you can just grind a rock down and give it to your baby, which you can't do. That is a poisonous salt. There's very little fluorine, magnesium and iodine. which all those vital elements evaporated off that rock salt a long time ago. There is no enzyme activity, there's no phytoplankton, it's very dead. Look at that with a meter, that's a biophotonic, measuring the light. If it's present there, it's practically none, zero. Put it onto some sun-dried sea salt, bam, full of life. Stop all this dead food, salt stuff, and then lots of people are even living on a saltless diet. And most of the programs in the beginning was natural hygiene in this whole movement, and they were totally saltless. Plus they had no herbs. Until we came along, Annie and I, and started bringing herbs in. We have a great understanding of herbs and Native American herb and things. And then from my background, more with my medicine teacher of the last 40 years, I've really learned quite a bit about native herb and the use of herb and things for whole ranges of things. But you have to have sodium and potassium, you have to have calcium and acetylcholine. That's a neuromuscular nerve and muscle neurotransmitter. Plus we said that's the major neurotransmitter in the septal region of the brain. But without sodium, potassium and calcium, you're not going to really have proper any neurotransmitters. And then the vast majority of people have very low sodium, they have hardly any potassium, because potassium is tending to be found in its fresh state. It has 19 electrons. And it has a spare electron to be able to be absorbed by a cell. But cook it, it's going to lose that spare electron. And now it can't really get into the cell. All right. These are the enterocytes, cells, which are the cells which only can have glutamine. Okay? All right. Next. Okay, the enterochromaffin cell is the actual cell which produces serotonin. All right. You absolutely have to have, you can see, calcium. Without levels of proper calcium, you're not going to have much cholinergic receptors and serotonin production. The things that rob calcium is all the greens, most of it, because though it has calcium in it, it tends to have a lot of acid. So for instance, kale, which is a test tube, crackpot sort of science, where somebody looks in a test tube and they go, wow, kale's got calcium. Well, that means that you can get your calcium. So most of the books I've read are full of crazy junk and not logical ideas. They've not thought, oh, wait a minute, well that kale's got a lot of tannins, that's going to bind with everything, how much is going to be absorbed of that? And then, got lots of oxalic acid here. It's so much it's actually a negative calcium ratio. You know, so yeah, calcium, kale's got calcium, but that calcium is not going to be made into your body. You have to learn how to get calcium. It's biologically transmutated from potassium. Calcium is biologically transmutated primarily from silica. You have to have potassium and silica in your diet, and as you can have these and have proper intestinal flora here, you produce calcium. But just trying to look at it, find it in some green isn't going to really help necessarily at all. And we're not herbivorous animals, as we sort of talked about, but some green is useful. All right. We talked about, serotonin is so important for bone mass. Without serotonin, no bone mass. Okay. It actually really does show too. Without serotonin, there's no calcium anyway, and so hey, calcium's going to be robbed from the bones. Liver stones form because of insipid pus from grains, beans, lentils, mung beans, zucchini beans, soybeans, all the tofu, all these texture vegetable proteins and things are so horrific. We should really avoid them. They are full of estrogenics and things. But anyway, these strange digestible proteins really attract to bile salts. It sticks inside the gallbladder and the sinusoid, which are collection areas of the liver. and it causes wax-like to stone deposit in the bile bladder. Okay, next. Regular bladder, always bile bladder that's found by every mortician. There is no such bladder, gallbladder, that is ever found empty. Next. Pain and sufferedness and things of the liver and pain all through here and round here in this region here is definitely bile stones, you know, and bile stones can block and they fill up typically and they pit the inside of the bladder. They actually get also lodged into the pancreas and cause diabetes type 1 and type 2. That is the reason for diabetes type 1 and type 2. And that diabetes type 1 and type 2 are the same. It's just a filthy, disgusting blood, and that's all diabetes is. But you must clear away bile stones to heal diabetes. Doing green drinks and stuff is weird as hell, and after a short while, anybody who did that, their diabetes is no longer really healed at all. They can end up really, and then most people who do greens and all this sort of thing, apparently that's going to heal the diabetes. It doesn't, and nobody can stick on the green drinks and things because it's impossible to do that. But most people have a bile occlusion, and that is the reason for diabetes type 1 and type 2. You have to get rid of bile stones. You could manage your diabetes by just not bringing any disaccharide sugar in, right? Which is what Leafsmod is. And then some people in the movement, they've taken some of my ideas and sort of put them into living food maybe, you know, but they came from macrobiotics or Ayurvedic, and they're just still really winging it and learning about things. But bile occlusion is the major condition on the earth. It is an unrecognised epidemic. And because only symptoms are sort of masking, the symptoms are further away, people cannot necessarily feel this condition. Okay. Do liver flushing and flush out your stones. Next. Bile bladder, okay, empties into the pancreas. Unless bicarbonate soda is being released here, sodium bicarbonates and things, there is no neutralisation of the acid churn, and food moves into the duodenum and small intestine in a very acid state and things. All right, next. We're going to be doing a talk which is about nature's operating table, and this is the science of autolysis. It's the science behind autolysis. And what is autolysis? It's the debulking of the body. There are only certain scientific facts and things that unless you follow this, you're not going to really trigger any autolysis much. But if you understand this, you know, you can clear up any condition. Okay? But we're having a session that's all to do with nature's operating table. And just to give you a rundown, it's just no starch, no flesh, no cooked food, no solid food, no breaking your fast. You hydrate your blood in the morning. Okay. What else have we got?
Almost done.
It really does involve liquefaction of the stool. Things which we do involve for 14 days a liquefaction of your stool. It includes actually a flush which has been designed over many, many years, which is the best of its kind, to non-surgically, non-druggist wise dislodge this gall occlusion, gall blockage. Okay. All sorts of bile stones harvested. You can start mining your own stones, and they can really look a lot like this. And the stones, typically most people have about a dinner plate's worth of stone, and it just displaces everything to make room for itself. I think Eaton down the back here, I don't know, I think he might have done 5 flushes, but we have said he had to slow down on the cleansing and reduce the flushes because he's had to buy new glasses every time he's done this, and actually he's shown the prescriptions and things, and also the cost of his glasses and going there and things. So he's had to manage a bit because his cleansing is correlating with better eyesight. Egla, his partner in promotion, she's done, I think, maybe 5 or 6 flushes too, and she's worn glasses for a long time, but she doesn't need glasses anymore, and she's got perfect eyesight, and she's flushed out the stones. This area is higher than your eyes, all right? Far higher. Flush them out, okay? Okay, you want to learn more, you can go to jubbslongevityeurope.com. There's absolute amazing information that's free for you, and it's an information that expands over 30 years, okay? And it's as current today as it was then, and it's unchanged. What's being taught 30 years ago is the same as what's being taught today, that we've been teaching about life food. We've been teaching seminars and workshops and things all about behaviour and consciousness. There's absolutely amazing information there at that site, and I think there might be 750,000 sort of hits all over the net with information everywhere, and Eaton has done what he can to start to put some of all of this together. So that's a great site to go to get more information. And that's it, is it? Okay, just leave that for a moment. What, we just have a little time, haven't we? 10 minutes? You got 10 minutes?
Yeah, we've got 10 minutes.
Might there be questions of personalness or some situation, or questions about someone you know, or anything that we could be, just as a question could be asked?
How do you get rid of eczema?
Eczema and cirrhotic and psoriasis-like conditions of the skin, and dermatitis like eczema and cirrhotic-like conditions are all healed by sealing back the intestinal tract. These conditions are healed by sealing the holes in the intestinal tract and by getting rid of the fungus out of the intestinal tract. They are forms of cancer, which can be shown actually it's possible to heal up, but sometimes not. It ulcerates and things, but it all is healed up and is related to intestinal tract. So
Get rid of all eczema?
yes, it clears up. What is eczema? It's bread and wheat and grain and bean being picked up by immune cells in your periosteum space, which is the space between the intestine and the lining of your abdomen. That's called your periosteum space. Nothing should be there, but when you've got, fungus growing through the intestinal tract and a celiac condition, which we're born with, eating milk product and foods like that can have exacerbated the situation, and the immune cells migrate and push that stuff into the skin a bit, and they can push it anywhere where it's sort of got slight sensitivity, so it just puts it there. That's what it is.
I was thinking about my brother has diabetes 1, which you say is a diabetes 1 and diabetes 2 is the same as you say.
Correct.
But how do you, I guess you just do the cleanse and then you can clear up diabetes 1 as well.
You move toward least one as much as possible, and you do some a Jubb cell rejuvenation where you're actually dislodging the debris and stuff so things can work again.
Yeah, the 14-day fasts and
Yeah.
this one.
Yeah.
How
Just
long? Have you-
no. Most everybody who's done it, they have healed up, and I can see that people can. I'm probably positive your brother can.
Is there any circumstances you've seen that you cannot clean it up, or when you cannot get rid of diabetes 1? Any circumstances where it's impossible?
Of course. People not following the program properly, not being able to necessarily, also having conditions where the sweetness of life is gone. Diabetes type 1 can often occur along with a bile occlusion or bile blockage because something occurred in youth where something was taken from the person. and they lost the sweetness of life.
It means this loss of sweetness of life. If you look somewhere, you can look what
Yeah, exactly.
different sickness means.
Right, exactly. Right. So
If you-
these are psychosomatic situations. A neurobehavior physiological analysis of these conditions always has a psychosomatic component of it, generally.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Mm.
You said, was the niacin increases the blood flow in the
Yes.
brain? So would be good for someone with like ADD or ADHD. Or
Fabulous.
But what if if that person also at the same time has a hyperperfusion in the thalamus, where they had just have way too much blood flow in that part?
Marvelous. It'll normalize itself because your brain, and a person's brain in such a condition has a functional plasticity. Hyperperfusion neurologically is where you've got more blood flow, as what you've just said, and hypoperfusion is areas where there's normalized low blood pressure or low blood flow. They all become more normalized as the functioning of the brain again is normalized.
Okay, so it'll just normalize it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. If you take care to do some flush out stones, and maybe do a little earthmate, which is the most nice and richness of plant-basedness, which has got humics and fulvics, and 12 of the most powerful medicinals in the mushroom family, which for longevity on the earth, combined. That's a great substance to do for a short period of time here like this. And then you're doing flush out the stones, doing some castor packs, and you're moving on to Leesmont and increase the niacin over the 14 days to 13,000 on the 14th day. Slowly increase your urine as you could feel drawn. If you are comfortable to do that, you might need to read more to be comfortable about that. And then you slowly reduce during that period of time any anti-seizure medication, any drug or poison, anything at all. They're drugs and poisons, synthetics. And you could just get a sense and feel for things, actually, how you feel. But my God, you'll be able to read books like crazy, and you'll be just remembering things more easy and things, and you'll feel calm, and just feel like you've got it more, yes.
I have a question. How could you possibly get rid of high blood pressure?
Oh, that's such a beautiful question. Lots of people have a sufferedness of this, and the high blood pressure, the reason for it is because the glutamate from flesh, glutamate from beans, glutamate from sprouted grains and grains and beans and dairy cause a molecule in a calcium channel to remain open in the cell membrane. Okay, so whilst you've got a glutamate there, that calcium cell opens up like this. Right, now it's open. Now that's useful, right, for a short period of time. Okay, because calcium floods into the cell membrane, and that causes some work to be done. Right, it also can cause it to like that. See if it's necessary. Okay. But when you've got a glutamate molecule which is cooked, it's the head of it fits right in there, but its sort of tail end is real congealed, coagulated. It has enzyme-resistant link material to itself, and so it fits into that glutamate receptor site of the calcium channel. It opens it up, right? But now, normal situation is that glutamate's taken out, and zinc right there goes and closes it again. But if you're eating beans, if you're eating any flesh or dairy or grains, the glutamate in that and then the cookedness and things such all cause the calcium channel to be remain more open, and other than being able to close, calcium floods in through the calcium channel and excites the cell to death and also causes hypertension. But I can guarantee if you do live food nutritional fasting or leaf smot nutting faster, you're going to clear up this condition, and if you remain more on Leesmot, you're going to be right there for your great grandchildren.
Good.
Yeah.
We started the cleanse yesterday, me and Michael, and I can already feel the fingertips or the skin is a lot softer.
That's exactly.
If you feel it on the
Oh,
outside,
yes.
definitely something going on inside.
Right. Who else has any stories of cleansing that's here? Thorsten, our cameraman? Okay. Eaton?
Yeah, with this cleansing, it's amazing. I can learn 2 or 3 times faster than anyone at school, and especially with urine therapy, the breakfast of champions. I can definitely learn rapidly.
Yeah.
Rapidly. And I have my intestines are...
Creates a greater, deeper meditative state because urine is not a waste product, okay? That's the thing.
Okay, but you said urine therapy is like drinking it, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, there's all sorts of... Cleopatra loved to drink it, but she spritzed her skin with it. She apparently, her skin was amazing. You know. Right. Only when urea is there, actually, you can get substance into your cells and things. But if you do urine therapy by itself, somebody who has high blood pressure, if they just had a little bit of their urine, put it under the tongue, it works much more powerful than nitroglycerin for all of a sudden relaxing of the blood vessel. But one other thing which will be amazing is to make sure no mouth breathing when you sleep. Must breathe through the nose, so there's no snoring. Yeah, that's very important. A way to do that might be just to be, if it's that comfortable, you know, is to put maybe a little bit of surgical tape over the mouth for 2 weeks maybe. And after that, you're done, you know. But there must be no snoring to correct this. Okay, because hypocapnia, which is the loss of carbon dioxide, carbon dioxide is very important because carbon dioxide is a smooth muscle dilator. You need carbon dioxide, you need nitric oxide to actually open up your capillaries. Without nitric oxide, carbon dioxide, there really is no real smooth muscle dilation, you see. So that's a good one too. You know, there's a big difference between a breath that's there's such a difference, right? When your breath is more like it should be when you're sleeping, but your breath through the day should be more like this too. Athletes take 1.5 breaths a minute, and rabbits and people living like rabbits breathe like this. There's just no energy in that breath, see? So stop snoring. If you find somebody snoring, it's like, whoa, wait a minute, whoa. By the time like 2 hours have passed by, the person snored, they have filled extra the volume of an Olympic swimming pool. Isn't that amazing? They've overbreathed the volume of an Olympic swimming pool. That's radical. There's such a little, other than keeping a proper levels of carbon dioxide. But anyway, quieten the breath down because we're really living in a time where there's not as much carbon dioxide in the air as there used to be. We've evolved through a time where we had 32% of our atmosphere used to be carbon dioxide, and our body has learned how to get rid of it but not keep it. So when one overbreathes, they breathe off the carbon dioxide, that's called hypocapnia, and all kinds of neurological, emotional, physiological conditions and things really is caused as a result of less than being able to be a quiet breath, non-localized, and more lengthening somewhat of your breath. And inspiration through the nose creates ecstasy, more feeling of ecstasy, causes endogenous opiates to be released, lengthening of the inspiration through your nose, that's all. And ideas come to us on the inspiration. And then our breath out is our expressive self more. That's something. I know there probably could be a little more, but in its simplicity, if we could move more toward less, but be comfortable, you know what I mean? I don't have a judgment about enjoying something a little bit, which you know maybe is a bit not quite right, you know. That's okay. So what? You know what I mean? But we need to find a way that we could do. But I would recommend, it would be so amazing to do a 14-day light food nutritional fast and flush out some of the stones and reduce the inflammation there, which is very easy to do. And where you're working and things, it still could be easy. It's easy to do, you know. Just start on Friday when you get back from work, and then you've got Saturday and Sunday to kind of practice the whole thing a bit. Because if you're working, then Monday comes along and you sort of really totally know how to do the whole process, which is pretty simple. Anyway, if you'd love to come, Kenny goes, Thorsten.
You mentioned that you were going to check someone out and see what their condition is.
Oh, thank you so much. Would you enjoy for me to do this? Is there anybody that would love? Okay, let's see. Catherine, I'm so sorry, but you had your hand up first, and Amrita really was interested too, and we had people down here too. Come on up just for 1 second, and I'm just going to do a quick reading. Things have started to change for Catherine because she's already begun a little bit of a cleanse, but okay. So straight away, you know, we can feel so much that's actually going on in the body, and I'm going to just touch you in a couple of spots very gently, but just so for you to feel where you have inflammation. We've got 1, 2, 3 spots primarily. We've got 2 spots, we've got 3 spots really down here, but 2 we'll palpate, and we've got a spot up underneath in here, which really is a bile occlusion. So those things, we've got a celiac condition which is going to palpate so you can feel it. Let's feel here. We have quite a serious bile occlusion up in underneath in here. We have an enormous amount of bilirubin in the skin, right? And
what
mum,
is that, phosphate?
That's phosphate. Of course, mum loved rice, and your grandmother told her, "You got to eat more," right? Because they wanted a big baby, and then mum did have a big baby, but she ate lots of rice and more rice than beans, you know, and some of the foods of her childhood. And comfort foods and things, especially when you're in utero. So when you were born, we were a bit jaundiced, and you had to be patted down a lot. My God, looked after. Okay, so we've got some blood here, modest here, and very little blood flow in the pelvic area. See, so that's a condition which you absolutely have to correct where you are, you know. And we've got low minerals. So during the fast, must do sun-dried sea salt and things, and keep that up to keep your energy good. Okay. Now thymus, from all the rice, which is loaded with benzenes because of the way it's grown. They use tractors and trucks and things, you know, and they actually use dump trucks and all sorts of things going on there. But they're backing into the sheds and, you know, and all these benzenes just contaminate the grain. There is no such thing as any grain on the earth that's not contaminated with benzenes. But other things that could have been is shampoo, conditioner, and lotions, which are all made with petroleum, and that kind of affected your thymus, which is made out of nail tissue that's here.
I used to dye my hair a lot.
Did you? Yeah, okay, that could be something too. Something. But probably the grains might have been the worst thing that you've done, actually. All the grains, because it's contaminated and loaded with benzene and things. So I'd put a castor pack over here, and you've got 4 places to do castor packs there and things.
Castor packs, what means that?
Castor pack is ricin oleo.
Uh-huh.
You're putting it on like a flannel material, and you know, and then you're folding it over, and you're placing it. For Catherine, she's got to do here, 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 and here. But I'm going to just put a little bit of pressure on the first primary spot, you know, that you have. Oh, I'm so sorry. But if you were very large, if I saw you and you were causing a lot of trouble, you could be just capped there and you'd be falling over. That would be the end of all the strength and stuff. But that's the inflammation. But we've got another one on this spot, and that travels down, and that's affecting ovary and things, and uterus, and also causing ovulation cycle, and the menses part of it, not so necessarily to be as comfortable as what it can be in things, because this can all be healed up quite a bit. All right. Now just see this hand here. Now we've got extra water sort of in your tummy a bit as well. You know, we have a little bit of adrenals exhaustion. So berries, bringing in some berries and things is going to really assist to help with adrenal function, producing more norepinephrine and epinephrine and things. And thyroid is like slight, you know, it's just slight. But thymus, there's very little blood flow through the thymus at the moment. So you do a caster pack over this and it can assist to help to heal this up, all right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're on track, you're doing 14-day, you're going to flush stones out, you're doing caster packs over the abdomen, you move more toward least mod as you can, and you'll be surprised how much things are going to be helpful for you. For average person they might lose, for you it might be 5 kilos or something, so I hope if that's all right, because it's going to happen, you see what I mean? So some people go, 5 kilos? Oh no, I can't lose 5 kilos. It's like, what am I going to be without 5 kilos? And things like, you know, like, oh yeah, maybe that's not quite right for you. Because that person can have a mental set about their body situation and things. So we have to do things in a way that's for the person and how they're feeling. And I'm letting you know that it'll be probably 5 kilo weight loss.
More is better.
Okay. Okay, good job. Thanks.
Thank you.
So the outside of the body acts as a literal window into the internal matrix to know what's going on inside.